Number 11. Here we go. Using public restrooms. Oh man, I cannot tell you how many people with ADHD have told me that they hate to use the restroom in public. I'm not talking about urination. I'm talking when you're going to drop the deuce, when you're going to take the Browns to the Super Bowl, stuff of that nature. Or another euphemism, when you're going to drop off the kids, so to speak. So, anyway, when you're doing your business in the restroom, especially if it's number two, and the stall really does not feel too private, you're going to feel a weird sense of, hey, there's someone in here. They're they might do something. They're watching me. What if they come and throw something or just take something I have? Because it's sort of a vulnerable situation. I mean, essentially, you're sitting on the throne, i.e., the toilet. Your drawers are down. You're sitting there minding your own business, probably on the phone. Maybe even hearing this video. And if you're hearing this video while you're dropping a deuce, I just want to say, hello, friend. So anyway, it'll be quite funny if you're dropping a deuce while you're watching this video. And I'm talking about dropping deuce in the video. So anyway, but it can feel quite intrusive, quite uncomfortable, very intrusive. I don't want to underestimate that word. I want to give it emphasis. Intrusive is what it feels like. And if there's multiple other people in that restroom, we're just gonna be like, man, like I don't want to. Excuse the phrase here. I don't want to drop a turd that's too loud. What if I stunk up the bathroom? Or just all these things start going through your mind. So I know a lot of people with the condition that I have friends that in high school, when they needed to drop a deuce, they went home. They literally went to the nurse's office and made up some bull crap, and then they went home. Took a deuce at the house, and then never came back to school. They would just show up in the beginning, and we'd be like, "Hey, where's so and so?" Oh, he went home, dude. He had to drop a deuce again. And then this particular friend of mine also has the condition, so it's such a thing we dread, using the restroom in public, dropping a deuce particularly. So I'm sure females feel a similar way here. I don't want people to think I'm just talking about guys here, just because guys usually talk about taking a dump. I have never once in my life, actually I have, but see that's just one person I know, because most girls I know have not told me what it's like when they take a dump. I mean, so I can only imagine. But anyway, so I'm sure there's some similarity there, but it just feels really intrusive and really odd. So it can be an issue. And then the glorious moment when you find a restroom where you can lock the door and you have the whole restroom to yourself. Those are the ones that you want to go to, especially if you have this problem as well. Number 12, misinterpreting a remark and the such as a threat or mock. Due to acetylcholine and norepinephrine, particularly, the way our moods fluctuate is unfortunately very unstable. And the way we kind of take things is also kind of very unstable. So I'm sure a lot of you with inattentive ADHD or combined types who have high levels of inattentive ADHD have been told at one point a joke or a remark, and then you kind of feel bad, and then the other friend or relative or whomever tells you, hey man, stop taking it up the butt, or don't take it to heart, or why are you being such a little girl, little boy, whatever it is. And you can't help it. And you can't tell yourself, like, okay, why do I feel so bad about such a small, insignificant thing? And it's because of this, because of our low levels of these neurotransmitters. So, and in those examples, I was talking about stuff that's direct, but sometimes it can be indirect. A lot of the times it's indirect, and that's when the problem comes. where we're with somebody and they say or do something and they have a completely different intention with that. And then we, with ADHD, and in this example, with inattentive ADHD, we completely misinterpret what our friend or whatever person was trying to tell us or do with us. And that can lead to many, many problems. I'm talking Three's Company misinterpretation type of problems. Except it's not going to be cute, it's not going to be funny. Mr. Furley's not going to be there. And Suzanne Summer, unfortunately, is not going to be there. But it sucks. Because then you're going to, not only you're going to be easily bummed out, but then sometimes when someone's just being casual about something or just trying to, perhaps make you feel good, you're going to take it a different way. You might take it a bad way. So, what helps out with that? N-acetyltyrosine and R-alpha lipoic acid. Tyrosine, if I didn't mention before, helps out not only with dopamine, but also helps out with norepinephrine. So, yes, tyrosine and N-acetyl, excuse me, tyrosine and R-alpha lipoic acid. Those will greatly help you out with that. R-alpha lipoic acid and what it does with acetylcholine levels has mellowed me out quite a bit. Because before I would get bummed out, or I would think people were trying to make me feel a certain way or do something. When in reality, they weren't trying to do that. It was just my perception of it. So, that's the advice for that. Those two supplements will greatly help you out. Because I guarantee you that there is a lot of people that have misunderstood things to a great capacity. And this has led couples to hold grudges, people to feel resentment, the in-laws to have very negative points of views of you, and just a bunch of problems that can just escalate to horrible and horrible levels just because of this. Yeah, just because of low levels of neurotransmitters because of having a condition. But thankfully there's help out there. So if you have a condition, do yourself a freaking favor and go get these. What are you waiting for? Callers are standing by. 13. Not trusting people. This yet again has to do with the condition. Now, if I go somewhere, I will usually not leave. Let's say I'm in a gym. I work out and go to the gym 4 times a week. 2.5 hour days, basically. So, let's say I have water with me, which I usually do. I will not leave that water out of my eyesight alone if I have to go somewhere else in that gym. Because in my back of my mind, even though I'm more than likely know nothing's going to happen to it, my mind does not trust that thing being left unobserved by me. Because my mind believes someone's going to go and put something in that or mess it up or spit in it or something. And I know I'm over-exaggerating it. But due to this is what I believe, due to the hunter and gatherer evolutionary tactics that, our genetics bring with this condition, that's still there with us. That lack of trust of only trust those that are kin, their close family and friends. Everybody else don't. And even sometimes with those close family and friends, we still don't trust. That doesn't mean that you as a person have any sort of flaw, or that, those people that have any sort of flaw. It's just an ADHD thing, an inattentive ADHD thing, where you don't trust leaving certain stuff out in the open. I am so surprised when I see people leaving gear and wallets and all sorts of valuable stuff wide open right in front of me, and then I just go to the restroom and leave the bag and everything open. I tell myself I can easily just take all this stuff. Well, I'm not a bad person. I'm not gonna go and do anything. But I tell myself, what if the person standing here wasn't me and was a messed up person and would take this person's stuff? So That's a pretty common scenario. Just kind of not having that not trust, with a lot of people. And especially if you've been wronged a lot in the past, or have hung around a lot of people and been in a lot of scenarios where you have been wronged. Oh, well, then that trust is going to be out the window. You're going to be you're going to be Stone Cold Steve Austin status, DTA, don't trust anybody. That's a quote I lived by as a teenager. Don't trust anybody. Because unfortunately, as you'll read in my book if you decide to read, I talk about how my trust was taken advantage of at times by certain people, and how that can really cause you as a person to always remember that, especially with the condition. As a hunter and gatherer, or someone who has the inclinations of one, you remember the stuff that went wrong. You remember it vividly. You want to avoid it as much as possible. Just like when somebody makes you feel bad, you want to avoid that situation as much as possible. So that's just that memory reminding, hey, remember when that person did that to you? This other person's going to do that to you as well. It's a mental thing. It has to do with characteristics of our hunter and gatherer condition. That's just my opinion. Just a theory, not as fact. Remember, you don't have to accept it, but that's the reason why I wanted to share it. 14. Conversations with neurotypicals. Being odd. Since you might bring up some very factual points that are to neurotypicals taboo or some other cliche nonsense, it's pretty obvious to some people that meet me that I don't like talking about things that are normally spoken of. I talk about some pretty eclectic and eccentric set of things just because I hate small talk. I despise small talk, and I've studied that a lot of people with the condition hate small talk as well. I like talking about intellectual things, profound things, things that are just out of the ordinary. And this can anything and everything to a certain extent. So, I like having deep, profound conversations with the very few close people I have with me. When I go out there amongst the public and I'm somewhere and I start talking to someone, I'll usually try to connect with them if they're trying to connect with me. I'll never be like, okay, get out of here. I'll never turn someone down. That's pretty messed up. So I'll sit there or stand or whatever, and we'll talk, and then they'll bring up certain things, and they'll tell me the usual garbage. Hey, I like this show, and it's gonna be some show like The Office, How I Met Your Mother, or one of those lame ass modern day cartoons like Rick and Morty or whatever it is. I'm sorry if you people like that stuff, but I don't. I'm really biased. Because of my condition, and because of my vast drop in my reward system when I went through puberty, as is common with a lot of people with inattentive ADHD, I have absolutely no nostalgia for anything past the age of 13. So basically, everything after 2003 I did not like. I would not do my teenage years again. I had good times, don't get me wrong, but just without the supplements and the medication, it was tough. Going places and just being reminded over and over again that you don't connect with people, it can be really excruciating. And you always wonder, I wonder to myself, when am I going to connect with somebody? When am I going to vibe with somebody a certain way? Music was the only connecting force I had with people. That's why I joined 6 bands all throughout middle school and high school. That's why I learned to play many instruments. Because music was my supplement. Music was my medication. So for me, talking to people, especially I guess neurotypical people, after they would tell me a little bit about their stuff, and I would start to talk about my stuff, they most of the time they couldn't follow. Or unfortunately, a lot of the time they perhaps wouldn't care either, because the stuff I would bring up would be really, really different stuff, and they weren't getting the type of when you have a conversation with people. Unfortunately, when you get to a certain level of adulthood, there's certain things you're supposed to quote unquote supposed to talk about. I hate that crap. Why? It's just a social norm and a social construct. Talk about talk about something that's a little different. That's just my opinion. So when I talk to certain, and don't get me wrong, certain neurotypicals have been very interested in what I've had to say, because I can tell that they haven't thought about that, or they never looked at something from that perspective. So I like connecting with those type of people, but unfortunately, I've noticed that the ratio is a bit imbalanced, and I'm not sure if that has to do with the location of where I live or the nearby cities, but I'm sure it has a lot to do with it. I'm sure the demographic in the area has a lot to do with it, but that's what I've noticed at a good amount of different cities and some of the different states I've been to. That some people they're so used to having such a nonchalant conversation that they're not really seeking anything. It's just a conversation for a conversation's worth. I'm not really a big fan of those small talk driven conversations. At that point, I'd rather just not say anything. So I'm sure a lot of you inattentive types, especially at some parties, feel that certain way as well. So if your partner has an issue with that, talk to them. And if you have the free will not to go to these things or not to have to speak, then you don't have to. And don't let anybody make you feel bad about that. That's just who you are. You're different. We live in an extroverted world where like applications and requirements ask you to be this ball of energy, and then you gotta be a people person. You gotta be energetic. You gotta put on smiles and do jumping jacks and this and that. And you're like, oh crap. Well, that's just not me. So, fortunately, we have to fake our way through a lot of stuff, as you probably have noticed. But do yourself some some good, and avoid these sort of things when you don't have to. It's nice to be around them sometimes, but don't force yourself just to be quote unquote normal. Don't force yourself to go to these things or do those things if you don't have to. That's me. That's the philosophy I've gone with. I mean, if it's for common courtesy, if I made a promise to a friend, you know, or a significant other, then yeah, go out of your way and just bite the bullet, so to speak, and and that after that, just be done with it, and that's it. And pat yourself on the back for for doing it. That's how that goes. And number 15, job interviews and interviews in general, just like I spoke about earlier. Yeah, you're gonna unfortunately need to flat out lie and basically make yourself out to be, the life of the party, the super energetic girl or guy that everybody wants to be around. And ironically enough, I have been that person, but usually it's around musician circles or circles of people that are interested in some of the stuff that I'm interested in. But yeah, for job interviews, you're generally gonna have to full out lie about who you are and what you are, and you're gonna have to cover it up sometimes. So I highly advise you get yourself a job where you're not gonna have to do all that. Get yourself a job where you're gonna be able to be comfortable and be okay with it at hours that are gonna be okay with you. Considering that the sleeping arrangement and schedule, waking up too early can be very disastrous for someone with inattentive ADHD. So, yeah, the job market, it's really tough. It can be very, very tough for someone with the condition, especially if they're not taking medication or supplements. Number 16, needing to put up a fake front at work. Regardless of how annoying coworkers are, we sometimes need to put up a fake front. Also, and being put in a bad mood constantly. If you have to work a job interacting with many people, especially ones that you don't like or that irritate you. I had a friend who got himself a. He's a combined type. He's much more on the inattentive ratio in that combination. He got himself a job in the returns and complaints department of a Best Buy. I would see this guy after work sometimes because we'd hang out with a couple of our other friends, maybe on a Friday, one day a week sometimes. And this guy would come so exhausted and pissed off, and he would tell me, "I don't know how I can survive this another day. I hate being around so many people so often, and so many loud, obnoxious, rude, ignorant, stupid, whatever it is, people." So, huge piece of advice. Do not get yourself a job that's going to go against your strengths as a person with inattentive ADHD. If you got inattentive ADHD, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a giant I in front of the first I'm pretty sure there's going to be an I in the acronym of the type of personality that you have according to the Myers-Briggs exam. The Myers-Briggs exam, if you don't know, is from, well, it's based off, inspired by, and carried on from the studies of of Carl Jung, whichever one, and it's based off his, I believe, his 16 different personalities. So this was done quite a while ago in the previous century, and has been interpreted by other people. And the Myers Briggs one is just a common one that I took. And yes, I am an introvert. My personality type is an INTP. That is, I believe, the most or one of the most analytical minds, and also one of the most introverted. So yeah, that means that we really don't like being around people. It also means that we really like to work on our own stuff. So, needing to put up a fake front at work, regardless of how annoying your coworkers are. Many people have complained to me about this and told me that they don't know what to do. They go to work, they end up miserable, they're upset, and they're around people that they don't like. So the best thing to do is to get yourself a job where you're not going to have to be around people that you don't like. A job where it might be one-on-one, or a job where you're not going to have to be around too many people. Because if you're an inattentive type and you have to get a job where you're really social and you're not taking supplements or your medication, odds are you're going to be miserable. Odds are you're going to be constantly upset. So do yourself a favor, get yourself a job that suits your strengths and complements your condition, as opposed to being a nuisance to your condition. Number 17, neurotypicals and combined and hyperactive types need to understand that our reward system is low and cannot come up as easily as all of theirs can, and that keeping a reward system at the low level is a struggle. This is why we avoid many people, many places, and many events. So this is going out to all the significant others of the inattentive types watching this video. If I may. Yo! Dudes and dudettes, we inattentive types, we don't feel too good most of the time. Because most of the time we have not slept good, and we're somewhere where we don't want to be, or whatever it may be, right? And we cannot make ourselves feel good as fast or as easily as you guys can. Combined types and hyperactive types, for the most part, they can get a boost in the reward system by doing a plethora of different activities. Inattentive types have a much shorter list of things that can boost up a reward system. So, and our reward system does not go up as easily when we do these things. So, Just something to be mindful about for those of you who are going out or married to or a family member to someone who has inattentive ADHD. Okay, so if the person with inattentive ADHD is a negative Nancy or party pooper or whatever negative term you want to apply, yeah, it's because yet again low specific neurotransmitters. Okay. Number 18, if you have to wake up at a certain time the following day, the entire previous day has to be dedicated to you setting up a schedule for that to be possible. Let me give you an example. I have a friend who was invited to a pool party with his significant other at one point, and his sleeping schedule is set specifically to a certain time. And because of having ADHD, that specific time varies and changes quite frequently, as I'm sure it does for a lot of you. So, he needed to wake up at a certain time the next day. And the entire previous day, he needed to plan that day out so he can force himself to go to sleep earlier because that event he was invited to was a little earlier in the day. And it was on a Saturday, I believe. So, he needed to really go out of his way in order to make himself easily available to go to sleep. Because going to sleep, if you have inattentive ADHD or ADHD in general, is very hard. It's not a let me lay down and close my eyes and that's it. No, it's a much longer ordeal. That involves a lot of tossing and turning, and sometimes you can't sleep, so you just get up and start watching something. So, my friend had to set up his entire previous day for the event, and then the next day comes, and then the friends of the significant other who were throwing the event were just like, we just canceled the event. Sorry, something came up. And my friend with the condition got very upset. He's like, I just wasted the entire previous day getting ready to do this, and now just like that, it's just canceled. So I can for sure relate to the annoyance and anger and irritation that causes, because that has happened to me as well. Which is why now I will agree to go to very few events. And if I do go to an event, I have to have certain criteria met. I know I might sound like a little prima donna saying that, but hey, with the condition that we have, there's got to be certain criteria that certain things got to meet for us to partake in. And if you haven't set a certain criteria for that, I recommend you do. Otherwise, situations in life are sometimes going to be a little extra rough on you. So if you want to rough it out and you think that you can handle it, by all means. But for those of you who struggle with that, yeah, set yourself a criteria and talk to your significant other. Tell them, hey, maybe we can go a little bit later to the event, or maybe we can see if we, just shouldn't go in general. Let's just see how the day goes, and. But if it's an important event, well, then you got to suck it up, and then you got to do what you got to do. Number 19, your energy levels will be constantly low, and you will feel fatigued most of the time. To say that inattentive ADHD brings a level of grogginess to one's day, frequently or constantly or the whole day, is an understatement. Our energy levels are really low, which is why stimulant medication for inattentive types is such a big help. It sort of lights our fire under our rear end, to quote the cliche. It gives us that combustion to get up and go and do what we gotta do. Because we don't have that. Stimulant medication, for the most part, works with the reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine, two neurotransmitters that we lack, that deal with concentration and motivation. Just putting that out there. So for those of you who don't take medication and don't know too much about stimulant medication, yes, to reiterate, there is instant release, which is usually 6 hours, and it's not much for you to worry about. You take it 6 hours, and then you take it again 6 hours later if you need to. And in between those 6 hours, though, I would highly recommend you take N-acetyltyrosine half an hour to an hour before your medication wears off. Because what happens is once the medication wears off, you're gonna feel the crash. You're gonna feel your neurotransmitters temporarily depleted, the ones that work with the medication. And since dopamine has a correlation with serotonin, if dopamine keeps going up from the medication, serotonin is going to start going down eventually. So to balance that out, one needs to take tryptophan in order to help balance that out. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, an hour to half an hour before the medication wears off, before the stimulant medication wears off, take tyrosine. Tyrosine is going to help boost norepinephrine and dopamine. It's going to help give it that nudge back up. So it should help eliminate the crash of the medication, because people can get really sad, really irritable, and I have heard some horror stories, especially from parents who have no idea of this, are wondering what's wrong with their son or daughter once the medication comes off. And this happens to adults as well, don't get me wrong. So, unfortunately, psychiatrists and people who prescribe medication, they don't really talk to the clients about the different supplements and what they can do to help. For instance, the supplement CoQ10, stands for coenzyme 10, is a supplement that I take that protects my heart and keeps my blood pressure and heart rate from rising. It keeps it steady and from not getting too out of control. Because when you take stimulant medication, regardless of how low, it can have an effect on your heart rate and blood pressure. So in order to help yourself out with that, particularly with the heart rate and keeping it at a nice healthy level, and for not to increase too much, coenzyme 10 really does the job. I felt physically a humongous difference when I started taking that. Coenzyme 10 was one of the earliest supplements I started taking after I got diagnosed and got my medication in my mid-20s. So, quite the helpful supplement.